Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, now what were you saying?
Oh, well, we're on air now. I was saying you do this right before the show all the time. You tell me something. You're like, hey, you're going to do this. And I'm like, wait, what? You didn't tell me this.
That's when that's when I'm at my most creative, though. I'm like what's the guy's name that Edgar Allan Poe. He wouldn't just make up those stories and stuff on the fly. I'm the Edgar Allan Poe of YouTube channel streaming.
Oh, okay. Yes, you are.
Yeah, that's
sweetie.
what I've heard.
Are you ready to introduce the show? Because we're
Bask
on.
in the Ravenness. Oh, we are. Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, okay. Welcome, everybody, to Ideology. We're going to have a fantastic discussion. If you're joining us from the last stream, yes, I'm still angry too. I have had my cigarette and everything is good to go. And we're going to try to tackle a very serious and near to my heart topic tonight. There are so many aspects to this that I don't think that you'll ever be able to even get close to touching the surface in a stream that in the time format that we'll be doing. But my goal here is for people, because speaking from experience, I was one of these people that before what happened to me happened, you have a stereotype about prisoners. They're stigmatized. You don't think that people can change or that they have any benefit to society. And it's my goal in this and probably several others that we'll do to try to reverse that stigma, because probably a lot more people than have been arrested at one time or another and sent to jail. It's a funny thing because I didn't know how many people I knew, actually, even from my high school, until I had my little run in. But people behind prison walls are some of the most creative, minded people that you will ever see. I mean, they can just, we'll get into that, but they can just do things that your average person can't do because of the environment that they're forced in. And the only difference between them and somebody that's using that to better society is a chance. And the biggest problem that people that are trying to transition from prison back to society is that very thing, a chance. So maybe there's somebody out there that may be in a position at some point, maybe they own their own company or they own a business or they're a hiring manager that after seeing this and several others that you'll rethink that tick in the box might not be absolutely not like it seems to be now, because there are real people behind those that ink on a piece of paper, and hopefully we're going to speak to that a little bit tonight. And so we have two fantastic. I didn't even introduce my lovely co-host. I'm sorry, Casey.
Right? I'm just, I can sign off now if you want.
Well, this was fun. I'll get with you tomorrow morning, okay?
I'm just gonna drink. I'm just gonna sit here and drink tea. I'll spectate. I'll manage.
Well, it's lovely to see you. Actually, I'll introduce Tom because I talked to Tom, and then I'll let you introduce the lovely Courtney, who I have followed since I started actually doing YouTube and have been a huge fan of her work. So I'm very excited that she is here. But Tom is with us tonight. Tom is going to give us his story about what happened to him and his journey through the legal system from somebody and from a point of view that is not very average. And so, Tom, thank you for joining us and coming on. I know that it's kind of hard to talk about, or at least it was for me at first, but thank you nonetheless for coming on and doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I usually don't talk about this kind of stuff, hence the reason, I'm not really showing my face on this. But I just think that people need to know about these kind of things, and I have an experience with it, so I thought I'd share mine.
Cool.
Did you want me to share now?
No. We're just doing introductions now. But I thought about getting a recording of you have 60 seconds left in your call and just playing it every time you talked, just so it would bring back memory.
Yeah, I haven't had to do that in a while, but I will say I got pretty good at it. So yeah, you can test me.
I know what you mean. Okay, Casey.
All right. And our other guest tonight is Courtney Hurd. She is the Godless Mom. She has a fantastic blog of her own that recently this year just moved to Pathos. So congratulations about that. Courtney writes about a lot of different topics, but I'll let her tell you about what she does. So hi, Courtney. Welcome.
Yes. Thanks for having me. Hi. I write about wrongful convictions, the death penalty, and also I write to atheist inmates who are currently incarcerated, and I publish their letters with their permission, and they kind of let us know what it's like for an atheist in prison, because there's not a whole lot. And also you kind of get to learn a little bit more about prison life as well in those posts.
I can't wait to hear some of the stories that you've gotten back. I think you should, like, somebody like you deserves a medal and your own day, because, and I'm sure Tom will attest to this too, on mail days, that's probably like the highlight of your entire day. And, for a lot of people, there are those that don't get any. So to have somebody that's willing to, write them, I mean, that's highly commendable. I mean, that's you're saint-like in my view.
Yeah,
so
it's hard to understand, but it's true. Yeah, it's tough to understand for anybody else, but it is a big deal. So,
well, I had a very good friend who went to prison, and that's what he told me as well. So I have and when I get the letters back as well, it's always very they're always very grateful for getting them. So I had an idea that was the case.
How do you know who to write?
Well, there's actually a website called Write a Prisoner, and you can sort them by religion. So.
Wow. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey.
None was an option, I guess.
No, actually, it was atheist. I went straight to atheist.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Well, I'm once again, I'm sure Tom and I will be validating each other's stories, but there probably is no greater concentration of Christians or other religious people than in prisons, because when you have chapel, the dorms clear, or the cell blocks clear empty, and everybody's at church. So if you need to find Jesus, he's in prison. So Tom, let's start with you. Let's start with you and kind of walk us through what happened with you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So, it's not a very popular thing to talk about, but it's actually a fairly common thing, and it's becoming increasingly more common, which I think is dangerous. But when I was a senior in high school, I was 18 years old. I had sex with a girl that was 15. And her parents decided to press charges on me. They gave me, because I was 18, obviously, I was over the age, I was an adult, and they decided to let me off easy, I guess is the way they put it. It was a 10-year deferred adjudication shock probation, which means that everything gets off my record when everything's over with. I have to go back to court to get it completely wiped off my record. It's still on there. But the shock probation means that I had to actually serve some time in prison. That time ended up just being a year, so it wasn't very long. But I did serve the year in prison. I was 19 years old, white kid, upper middle class from the suburbs. Definitely didn't know anything about prison. It was definitely eye-opening. So instead of freshman year in college, like all my other friends, I went to prison instead of college. So that was interesting. But yeah, that's pretty much my story.
And you're still on it now, right?
Yeah. I have a little less than 3 years.
Okay. Before we get into, go ahead.
I was gonna say, but I pretty much finished everything. So now I'm waiting it out. I was trying to get off early, but they said because of the crime, they don't let people off early for that.
Yeah. So, before I do want to speak to some of the experiences that you had while you were in there, but in terms of what you're going through now, what messed me up when I had my my drug charges, I initially got put on probation too, because I didn't have a record or anything like that either. So they put you on probation, and it seems like everybody that I've met that has had a lengthy, time on probation, and I'm not shifting the blame at all, because ultimately it is my responsibility, but it seems to me that they set it up in a way that
you fail.
It's almost like yes.
Yeah.
And because what happened with me, and I'll share what happened with me, is during that time, my license were revoked. So I had a timetable that I had to pay, fines on. I think I had like $3,000 in fines to the state. So when they revoked my license, they then came to me and said, okay, you have to have your job in 90 days. And if you don't, we violate you. But you can't get to your job without, that license in that way to I mean, I'm sure you could, if you really, you could walk, take a bus. I know there's going to be somebody out there that's going to say that, but when you're going to get a job, your employer is looking at, everything about you, sees that you recently got in trouble, sees that you don't have a reliable way to get there. It just sets you up. So then when that time came around and that $3,000 was due and I didn't have it, it was, you're out of here. So, let me ask, hold on one second, Tom. Let me ask Courtney something. Anybody that you're writing to, do you have any type of dialogue in terms of their backstories in that way? Like, do you know how many, like, you talk to that are there on, like, probation violations instead of the actual crime that they committed?
No, I don't think there's any of them that are on probation violation.
So what I was also going to say about that is a lot of the people in prison are repeat offenders, or they will offend while they're still on a parole or a probation, which sends them back. So yeah, it's pretty common for somebody to mess up on probation or parole and have to get sent back. I've messed up twice now. Nothing serious enough to have to send me back, but it's not fun. You have to take extra classes, pay extra fines. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's a really tough life.
Are you monitored, or did you have a period where you you had like the severe restrictions where like you had to be?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, for a while. Yeah, for most of it I was curfew. I mean, I had to take polygraph tests twice a year. Yeah, it was about as strict as you could possibly get. Thankfully, though, I didn't ever have to register as a sex offender or anything like that, even though this crime was sexually related. So, I mean, I guess in a way they did let me off easy, but it just doesn't seem like it because it's 10 years when I was, 18 years old. So,
yeah. Well, let me ask, because we have two lovely ladies in the stream with us. What do you guys feel about that in terms of the actual crime that he committed with a like an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old? Should a 10-year sentence hanging over his head? I mean, I go back and forth on it because I'm not sure what the right answer is on that.
Go ahead.
Well, if you ask me personally, I think that it's it shouldn't be a crime to begin with. I mean, they're 15 and 18. It's not 15 and 28. You know, it's 15 and 18-year-olds are going to hook up no matter what we do. And the answer is not to throw them in jail. It's not to ruin their entire lives. That's not the answer to this. It's ridiculous to me that that is a crime. And honestly, I'm very sorry to hear about your experiences, Tom.
Thank you. Yeah.
And that happens a lot too with the rate that we incarcerate people nowadays. What I find like frustrating as hell is that in California, you have people in prison that are serving years, decades for marijuana that is now legal in that very state. So, I mean, it just shows you that society can, radically change on a dime, and everybody outside of those walls is, reaps those benefits. But where it doesn't reach in, or at least it hasn't reached yet, is to those people. Because like I said at the beginning, it's easy to wall them off and forget about them. And Courtney, let's switch over to you real quick and tell us some of the stories that you've had with, if you can. I don't know if you can share those or if you keep those to yourself, but if you can, give us, kind of some examples of what you talk with them about.
Well, I think the most interesting one right now is Pablo, who is in Texas, and he's on death row, and he's an atheist, and there is no evidence linking him to the crime. None. There's just eyewitnesses who their eyewitness testimony. As atheists, we know that eyewitness testimony is pretty much horseshit. I mean, it's toss up whether or not you're going to get things right, even if you try. Like, even if you're being dead honest and you're dead sure of everything, it's 50-50 whether you're getting it right. So yeah, he's got a couple of eyewitnesses, and they happen to benefit from their testimony with, they were at the scene of the crime, so they were also suspects. So to put the heat on him, they were cleared. So that's it. That's the only evidence they have against him, against a man who they are going to put to death, who already had an execution date and got a stay of execution. And some awesome person, anonymous person, sent me the book, because I couldn't get the book up here in Canada. So they sent me the book that had like his case in it. And it's literally just two essentially jailhouse snitches who have ratted on him, and that's it. That's all they've got. And he has maintained his innocence the entire time he's in there. He should not be in there. Whether you think he's innocent or not, there's not enough evidence to put someone to death with this case. And it's pardon?
How long has he been in there?
I think it was 1991, early 90s.
Wow.
Oof.
Man.
That's a long time.
How do you not get like emotionally invested in something like that? Like, because that has to affect you greatly.
Yeah, before I did Godless Mom, I used to do a whole lot of anti-death penalty activism, and that's more or less why I stopped. I would try so hard working on these campaigns to get these people to have a stay of execution and stuff like that, and then every time the execution date would come around, and I would sit there glued to my computer and find out that they'd put him to death, and it was just like heartbreaking. And there's a couple of them who I used to write to that are still alive. There's one in San Quentin who actually was serving time with Stanley Tookie Williams, who, I don't know if you know who he is, but yeah. He was a pretty famous gangster, and in the same gang, I think, as what Snoop was in, Snoop Dogg. And he was put in prison for murder. And in prison, he started to learn and educate himself, and he started to work against gang violence, and he started to write books for kids. And he was actually nominated, I think it was 3 times, for the Nobel Peace Prize, and Arnold Schwarzenegger still put him to death. So even though he had turned his life around and nobody was asking for him to be released, everybody was just saying maybe commute his sentence. They didn't do that. And I think that had he been allowed to remain alive, he would have done a lot of good for youth, especially in the inner cities in California. But yeah, the guy that I used to write to was his neighbor, I guess, on death row, and he's still alive.
It's that is a perfect way to, I think, sum up exactly what I wanted to kind of bring to the table here, and that is that just because somebody gets arrested and put in prison, that doesn't have to be who they are for the rest of their life. They don't have to be that criminal forever. They're only that as long, for the duration that you paint them that way. If you change the way that you see people and the way that you think about those situations, then these people, I was in there for a year and 3 days, and obviously nervous as hell going in. I thought that I was going to get just jumped on all the time. There's all kind of things that go through your head when you're on the way there, especially. Tom can probably take the bus ride there. You're looking at everything outside the window, and everything you pass, especially as you get closer, you're like, that's I remember going, that's the last Walmart I'm going to see. That's the last McDonald's I'm going to see you just start counting off these little things that at one time were insignificant, but suddenly they make this, they're all meaningful. And anytime you see things from the outside world come in, it just wakes you up to your reality. But in that time that I was there, I wouldn't go back and take it back, because I learned so much about not only who I was as a person, but other people, and other people that you would normally count out or think that, they don't have anything to offer to society. These people are insanely creative on a level that I think most people would be astonished at. You would get commissary each week, and you could go up and get anytime. It's like a store on the prison grounds, but they would take potato chip bags and clean them out and flip them inside out and strip the potato chip bags, and they would weave these elaborate, beautiful. It looked like you would buy it in a store, picture frames. They would they would dip them in like a glue and let them to dry, so they were hard, just like a picture frame, but it looked like shaped metal. And they would do this as a way to for people who didn't get money, they would trade it for other items, and then people, when they do like family day or whatever, they would put pictures of their loved ones in it and give it to them. But you have stuff like this going on all day long. It's not like you would think in like movies and stuff portray it. They're not all sitting around plotting how to take the other one out. A lot of times it looks like, to me, it's like a nursing home almost. People are sitting at tables just making shit all day long, because all you have there, it's true. All you have there is your head. And that's one thing that I wanted to kind of get across and see if Tom had the same experience, because when I got there and the first night that they put you in your cell, you are carrying everything that you're going to own for the next year in a tub like this, and they make you back up into the cell and put that down, and then come up to the gate, and they unshackle you, and then you step back and that gate closes, and that's the loudest noise I've ever heard in my entire life. And it only happened that one. Was it the same for you, Tom?
So I was not in a 2-man cell. We were in dorms. Yeah. So
I eventually got to go to one.
Yeah. I was going to say it's much better. When I was in county, I was in a cell. And then when you get to the dorms in prison, it's way better.
Yeah.
But what state were you in, by the way?
I was in North Carolina at Noose.
Okay, I was in Texas. I just wanted to.
Oh, you had it way worse than I did then.
I don't know. I actually was locked up with somebody from North Carolina. He said it was pretty bad there. So
I guess it depends on where you go. But the psychological aspect is kind of where I was coming from. It wasn't actually the loudest noise that I've ever heard in my life, but it was so distinct, and nothing has compared to it since. That when it clanks shut that first time, it sets in you that this is your life for a year, and you have no control whatsoever over anything that you do, and you can't I can't leave this room even if I wanted to. There's no way I can physically leave this place. So that was I guess a kind of, I don't want to say spiritual, but it was something that I haven't ever experienced before, because you're taken in a environment that you're not used to. The sounds, everything is amplified. When the guards walk around with their keys, you can isolate the keys swinging back and forth. And a lot of you know that I was coming out of religion around this time too, which is a lot to do with why I reacted the way that I did and going to drugs, just to not feel with coming out as gay and coming out as not a Baptist anymore. There's a lot piling on. And if I hadn't have wound up there, I would have never had the year to meet the real me, the me that I was suppressing for so long, and the me that I refused to acknowledge because he was an abomination. We got to hide him. So in a way, it allowed me to just be one-on-one with who I was as a person. And another stereotype that I can go ahead and dispel is the fact that everybody in there is homophobic, because I want to make this point, and I think that this, if you really think about what I'm about to say, it will hit home. I never had a problem whatsoever when I was in prison with my lifestyle. No one bothered me. No one's made it an issue. One guy at some point said fag, and there was a whole table full of guys that quiet that down real quick. I was treated better by what society considers the worst than I ever was a day in the church that I went to every Sunday. And that's the impact and the overall ugliness that people don't want to talk about religion. The people that society deems are evil and wicked, and the truth of the matter is they just made a mistake. They're not evil. Their circumstances are not good, and so they did the best they could. They made a mistake. They got wrapped up, and they got put into that system that we have now that's broken. And despite that, these people went out of their way to make sure that I didn't feel isolated, or on days, there's tough days in there. On days that are tough, they'll slip, even if it's something simple as giving you an extra honey bun or something like that. I mean, the little things that they did made me feel more welcome than any Sunday I spent shaking hands and smiling at people that would get up on that pulpit and say that because of who I am, I'm an abomination. So I want that to be put out there, because I was on both aspects of that, and I think it's important that we give these people a shot. Tom, let's bring it up a little bit and elevate the mood. And I'm sure that Courtney has probably heard of this in their writings back and forth, but swoles and steak cakes.
Oh yeah. Commissary day. I mean, it depends on who you hang out with too, but yeah, everybody goes in together, and you'll make, we called it spreads. I don't know if y'all said that or not, but yeah, you'd all put together and make spreads and just get real creative. It's insane how creative, like you were saying earlier, how creative people get while they're in there. I mean, you would think these guys are like professional chefs when you come back with your commentary.
Well, take us through. I want people to hear the kind of things that you have to use and how it turns out. So take us through the like when you would do one of your spreads.
Yeah. Okay.
What would
So
you guys throw in?
Oh man, a real popular one that we would do was, I guess, our take on some kind of like Mexican dish. I don't know if you can say that, but and when I explain it, people might think it sounds gross, but to us, while we were in there, at least, it was like the best thing ever. And so essentially what we would do, we'd get a big bag that you would get cereal in. And then when that cereal's gone, you stuff the bag full of, let's say, like Fritos, chili meat, cheese, beans, salsa. Like, you can actually get all this stuff in commissary. I know people you can buy ice cream and Coke in commissary. It's really not that bad. And then how we would cook it, because we'd have to cook it all together, is we would fill up a big bowl with boiling hot water, which we could get in like the room that everyone hangs out in. You could get boiling hot water, fill up a bowl full, and then we would lay it on top of something so it wouldn't get wet, but then cover the bowl so the steam would actually cook the food inside the bag. And so then when it's done, you cut open the bag, open it up, and it's just like this huge meal for like 12 guys. It's awesome.
Yeah. And they, that's the, I always thought that was so funny. And I actually have a scar on my hand. You probably won't be able to see it for the light, but I have a scar right here because I got 3rd-degree burns on the little thing that they give you for, looks like a water fountain, but it shoots out boiling hot water.
Yeah.
And it's for coffee because they give you instant coffee. And I always thought it was just weird because you have some people that, obviously let me say this too. I'm not trying to paint a rosy brush about everybody that is in prison, because yes, there are people in prison that deserve to be in prison. And yes, by the laws that we have today, I deserve to be where I was at. My overall point to this is to point out that once you pay that debt, then they should be allowed to, reintegrate a little bit easier, to be given a chance mostly. But I'm in no way excusing anybody's actions, but to have this thing in the middle of the room with all of these guys walking back and forth all day long with access to hot boiling water, and there was not one instance. I've seen fights and people get busted in the head with locks, but nobody ever went to the boiling water. I guess I
thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. I always thought, like, what would happen if a riot broke out? What's going to happen? And like you, I've seen a lot of dudes get pretty messed up in there, but nothing with the boiling hot water. Makes no sense. Yeah. I don't
know. Courtney, tell us about what you do for what you write for Patheos. Is it just the letters back and forth, or do you actually go in and speak about the prison system as a whole?
Yeah, well, I have a series that I'm working on right now about wrongful convictions. So I write, that's like an obsession of mine. And I write about that and basically the different causes of wrongful convictions and how horribly common they are. And that's why Pablo's story kind of struck home with me too, is because, there's a good chance that he's probably innocent given how often it happens. And I also have written a series about the death penalty and why it's just not a good idea. And no matter what your argument is for it, it doesn't work. And these are just two things that I've been obsessed with since a very good friend of mine went to prison when I was, in my 20s, I guess. And we were kind of not talking to each other because he'd gotten into drugs. And I didn't want to watch him kill himself. And it was like 3 years after that I just Googled him and I found out that he'd gone to prison and in Ohio. And that it was like a light went on in my head. Suddenly I realized that there's all these people behind bars who could be really good people, because he still is. And suddenly I had to read about it. I had to just consume everything about it. And I've just never really stopped. And so I write and talk about it pretty much whenever I can. And I think that it's not my most popular stuff on Pathos, but I don't really care. I just can't stop.
It's important. Give us some stats then on wrongful convictions. Like, how frequently does that happen? And in those cases, what's the odds that, or let me back that up. How many people have we put to death that are actually innocent?
None that we can prove beyond any doubt. However, there was one that was maybe 10 years ago, I think. He was put to death. And after he was put to death for an arson that killed his 3 young children. So he's, a grieving father as well when he was put to death. But it was afterwards, they reviewed the evidence and they sent it off to a whole bunch of different arson experts, like world-class arson experts all over the world. And every single one of them agreed it was not an arson. And the original investigation was just done by a fire chief who had no experience in investigating arson. He saw a splatter kind of pattern on the floor that he thought meant was an accelerant. And that was the only evidence that he had that this guy had set the fire on purpose. And all of the world's major arson experts agreed after he was put to death that it was not arson at all. So, I mean, it comes down to whether or not you trust the experts.
Well, so you would think that they would send it off to arson experts before they kill somebody. Like, to me, it's just like the wrong order.
They sent it off to American arson experts before he was executed, and they gave the report to Governor Rick Perry, I believe it was at the time. It was Texas.
Oh.
And
Fuck that guy.
Yeehaw.
And it yes, when they killed it, that said this is not arson.
And people don't understand, and I'm sure Courtney can attest to this, but once you're convicted, it is almost impossible to get anything turned over on appeal. Even if you have, I have seen, I don't know how many cases where they think that they have DNA evidence that will prove this, and you still have to fight it all the way up to superior courts to get that to be introduced. And meanwhile, your clock's still ticking. Like you're, if you're on death row, that's still going on. Do you, in your experience with looking at these cases, do you kind of have a theory on why you think they make it so hard to get back in court, or why they can't just, like, if it's a DNA thing, match it, and if it comes out that it matches, then he stays in, and if it doesn't, then that should be grounds for release?
Well, I think there's several different reasons for why they don't just immediately jump on it. And you're right. It is like that with the oh, my dog is here. They even when you have the Innocence Project working on your case with you, it still takes decades before they agree to test the DNA evidence. And I think that the reason why is because it's admitting that the criminal justice system does not always work. And it's also expensive. It's really expensive. When people get out of prison, they come back and they sue because they've lost years of their lives, and they usually win tens of millions of dollars. So it's very expensive. So they try to keep them in prison as long as they can.
Now, that is the point that I think everybody needs to listen to. Go ahead, Casey.
Well, and it doesn't really benefit the prison system at all for people not to be in prison. I mean, especially given for-profit prisons, which really piss me off. I don't know how any of y'all feel about for-profit prisons, but prison privatization became a thing in the 1980s, pretty much. I mean, the first one was, I think, in the mid 1800s, but they weren't really used a lot until the 1980s with Reagan's push and the war on drugs. So they became a thing because it saved the government money to have these prisons that were run more like a business. Well, so it's a money-making venture. I'm sorry, but I don't understand the concept of locking people up for money. Like, that just does not make sense to me.
And to answer your question, where I stand on for-profit prisons, I would like to say that categorically I am anti-prison. I do not support pro or government. But yeah, go ahead, Courtney, and speak to that point. Why, if people understood, I think, how much revenue that a prison would bring in on a daily basis, because everything costs in prison, everything that you do, and it's usually double what it is in the real world. And I'm sure you have guys yourself that write to you, and you can take you get $40, or we did $40 a week to spend on your like commissary chips or anything like that. You would probably get maybe 3 days worth of food on that, and what they cover in terms of their wholesale cost, the rest of it goes straight to the state. And every time you call somebody, it's I think I went through probably $70 a week. Yeah. Go ahead. No, I'm going to get you started. Go ahead.
Oh man, that was like that was one of my biggest issues when my friend was in prison. He was in for 9 years. And so I figured it out 3 years in. And so for the last 6 years of his sentence, I would talk to him almost every day. And I to this day, I don't know how I came up with the money, but there were days when we would have several calls because we were like very good friends. And I was making a lot of money back then, but it still was like, it made everything just so tight. It was $20 every call to Canada from Ohio, $20 for 15 minutes. And it was just insane. And the thing is that I didn't have a whole lot of problem paying that money, but for the most part, people in prison, their families are not wealthy. They can't afford that. And so that means that families don't get to stay in touch. And when you have like a father who's in prison on marijuana charges, who's there for, let's say, 10 years, can't talk to his kids, and his family can't afford it, it's just, there's no sense in that. Like, where is the good that's coming from that? I can't find it anywhere.
None. And even with visits. Go ahead, Casey.
So I have a quick question. So like phone calls, like I guess I get a little bit calling internationally would cost, but like, so if you're in prison and you're locked up in North Carolina and your family is in Kentucky, you can't call them. You have to pay to call them.
Oh,
no, they have to pay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What?
They have to sign up. They have to sign up for an account. Basically through, well, for me, it was MCI, and you have to, or JPay or something like that. So you have to sign up for an account, and they will like preload your credit card or whatever, pre-charge it or whatever. And once you get to a certain point, no matter how much you can afford, like if you can afford endless calls, they don't care. They cut you off at a certain point, and they say no more calls because we're afraid you can't afford it. You're not going to be able to pay your bill. And so you have to go through the whole process again. And it can be sometimes months just to get that account set up. And so you're not talking to that person. And for me, it was just a good friend, but like he had a mom and a brother, and, there was all kinds of people in there who had kids and parents and wives. And, they're not allowed to talk to this person who they love more than anything in the world for months at a time. And then when they do, it costs them $20 for every 15 minutes. And then, of course, they also like ship these people out like far away to prisons that are far away from their families. So the families can't even go visit them. They can't afford to visit them. They can't afford to pay for the calls. It's just ridiculous.
On that call thing, I wanted to mention, at least in Texas, you have to, when you get transferred from county, first of all, they don't tell you. They just take you in the middle of the night, I guess for security reasons. So you can't like call ahead. So they take you in the middle of the night. You don't know you're leaving. Then you get shipped off to a transfer unit, which you'll be at for probably like 3 weeks. And it takes a long time because you can't call anybody from the transfer unit. You can only write letters. And you can only write letters if you have commissary to like buy this stuff. So I had to bum off people pen and paper just to write my parents. You know, I'm 19, so they're freaking out because they don't know where I am and I'm trying to write to them. So by the time they get the letter that says I'm in this transfer unit, I already transferred to another unit. So, I mean, I didn't talk to my parents for like months when I first got transferred, put in prison. And I mean, it doesn't matter. I know you're asking about if it's international or outside state. That doesn't matter. Even if you're inside the same state, you have to pay for every single call. So, yeah, it's a pretty wild system.
$20.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Envelopes.
I guess I don't understand the theory of trying to make money off of people that are incarcerated or their families. And that doesn't make sense to me. Like, to me, I'm very humanistic in nature. And like, I don't understand the whole idea of profiting off of this kind of suffering. Like, I get it. I get that most people there have committed a crime, broken the law, whatever. I get that. But like, they're in there. So like, they're doing time. Like, there's just certain things, like, I don't know. I feel like a little bit of common decency. I don't know. Maybe I'm just ridiculous because like, maybe you don't earn common decency if you've killed somebody. I'm not really sure, but I don't know.
Well, I think that you do, because the way you treat people says a lot more about you than about them, right? So regardless of who you're talking to and who you're around, like, treat them with respect, period. End of story. You don't need to judge what they've done before or weigh the pros and cons of should I be nice or shouldn't I be. Just fucking be nice. Like, and it's not that hard. The person's in prison. They're locked up. They're being punished. And there's no two ways about it. So it's not like, you know, we have to be mean to them to continue the punishment or something like that. But I do understand how some crimes obviously make people mad. That's a different story. When you're angry about something, it's very, very difficult to, you know, talk to somebody rationally and stuff like that. And in those senses, like, a lot of those crimes make me mad too, right? So I get it. I get that people get angry about that stuff. But as far as like intentions, treating people kindly should just be the way that it is, regardless of who they are. But as far as like, how can they do this? It's basically modern day slavery. The United States of America has figured out a way to keep slavery going. And that's all it is, really. They're making money off of human suffering.
I literally had to pick crops and work out in the field, so it was slavery for us.
They put you to work too.
Yeah, exactly. I was part of the field crew.
So did you, now this, I'm completely ignorant about this because I've never been to prison and I've never been close to anybody who's been to prison. So I don't know anything about this. So forgive my ignorance, but is that something like being on a field crew or something that you would enjoy besides you? We haven't talked about it. Anyways, quit being offended. We're busy. Is that something that people like enjoy, like going and being on a field crew or doing something like having a job because it gives you something to do? Like, is that actually a positive thing?
So I think it depends a lot on your job. Since I was young and in really good shape, being a part, at least on the crew I was in, was not good. It was the toughest work I've ever done in my life, ever will do. And if you ever, you know, just lay down is what we called it and just say like, I can't do it today, they actually give you another charge for disobeying like an order. So you can actually go back to court and get another criminal charge because you can't do it. I mean, the guard one time like broke a guy's arm because he just refused to work anymore. And granted, there was a whole fight. I shouldn't just say he randomly just broke his arm. But no, my job was not fun. My job was horrible. If you're sick, so yeah, if you can prove it, there's like a medical area where they have nurses. If you can prove that you're sick, then yes, you can get a day off. But the number one rule really is you don't want to piss off the guys that are in charge. You what?
Does it cost money to see a nurse? You're fibbing, right?
Hell yes, no.
Well, for us, it only cost if you like needed medicine or anything like that. You could go see her, and
pay for medicine. Oh my god!
Yes.
So if you like need something, then it costs money. Yeah, but honestly,
even
if you're
sick, I'm upset about this now.
Even if you're sick, it's not really worth it. Oh man, what was it like? 20 cents or something like that. It was like 20 cents a day
or a day.
No, not
a day.
Yeah, it was like a day. Yeah.
For the hardest work you've ever
been
done.
Nice. Yeah. I
so
remember.
That's how you earn. Your jobs is how you earn money to buy the stuff.
Well, really, what they're doing is like, it's technically not slavery, I think, is they're like, oh, well, we're paying them. And when they get out, they'll have a little bit of money to start again. I mean, I think it's just for them to feel better about themselves. I don't think it really has anything to do with the pay.
20 cents a fucking day. Like I won't even go get tea for 20 cents. Like, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Think about this too. That's not where your charges stop. They charge you, or at least in North Carolina, I don't know how they do it in Texas, but when I got out, I got a bill because they charge you every day that you're in prison. You have to pay back the state for every day. Mine turned out to be like $32 a day or something like that. You have to pay back every single bit of your time there.
Yeah, and well, on top of mine, I was still serving my probation, which is $120 a month. So they were charging me for my probation while I was also in prison. So when I got out, they were like, "Oh, by the way, you're behind on your fees."
Yeah. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of this. How they set people up to fail, and I wasn't doing that as a way of making an excuse. They really did because when I got out, I had a bill in my hand for like $3,000 some for my stay. Like I was checking out of a hotel. You sign for the stuff that you came in with.
No, I would lose my shit. I would lose my shit. I can't.
I'll put you back. Yeah,
you go back.
You were getting out.
Yeah. So what happens? So do you have like a payment plan or like a long enough time? Because a lot of people won't hire. People who have been convicted of crimes. So like if you have a bill in your hand, how do you get a job
Good
to pay
question.
the bill?
How
And
do
if
you
you don't pay the
apartment?
bill, well, that's true. You don't have a place to live. So if you don't pay the bill because you can't get a job because you were in prison, can they send you back to prison for not paying the fucking bill?
That's why.
Oh my God, I hate this. I hate this. I don't even want to know more about this.
Oh, it gets better. I got something else in there.
You're seeing, and let me say this, Dave, and then you can go. You're seeing why people can't get out of it that don't have a support system. If there aren't people in their corner when they get out, they have nothing and nobody. And so they are taking on the world all by themselves. I was lucky that I had a support system and a family that didn't leave me. But most of them in there don't have that. And so when people say, well, you didn't learn your lesson when you went to prison. Well, when they got out, they didn't have anybody. So they went back to the one thing that they knew how to do. And that was, either selling on the street. They have to survive. So,
and the people they met
we have a system now that's just not working. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, if the original crime that you committed to get in there involved any other people and you were required to perform pay them restitutions, they call them restitutions, that's giving them monetary damages. Those monetary damages would have earned interest while you're in there for any given length of time. So if you're in there for 10 years or 25 years, that's some considerable interest and back payment.
Or you have to pay interest?
Heck yeah.
Heck
yeah.
Yeah, I also had to pay towards a charity. They just decided.
Yeah, they'll arbitrarily add stuff on there just for the hell of it.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, there's a charity for like awareness for yada, yada, yada that you need to pay for because it's related to your case.
Oh, aware my ass. I don't.
What pissed me off the most? What pissed me off the most about anything is that I wasn't prepared to go. Like a lot of people, when you're getting ready to go off to prison, that's coming. Like that's your attorneys told you that this is what's going to happen. And I didn't have that. I had a plea deal worked out with the prosecutor to extend my probation. And I went to court. I had actually, this is when I was a chef. I had a rehearsal dinner that night. It was a Friday. And I remember thinking, okay, I've got to get in here. I told my attorney, I said, look, I'm not going to be able to hang around like I usually do after the hearing, because I've got to go and get ready for this rehearsal dinner. So we get up there, and the prosecutor has agreed to the terms, takes it up to the judge, and the judge is looking over it. And my attorney like bumps my arm, like, kind of like, hey, what's happening? And it was going like way longer than it should have. The judge, usually when they have those prearranged deals, the judge just signs off on it and you're good to go. But it's always up to the judge to enforce it or not. The judge can just say,
right,
based on a whim or a mood, I don't want to enforce this. And that's what he did to me.
Mm-hmm.
He rejected the prosecutor's terms, said that I had been given 2 chances. That's too many. And so he was committing me over to the Department of Corrections right then. So I'm grabbed by my shoulder and pulled backwards, handcuffed behind your back. And I mean, you don't have time to react. Like you would think that you would be like, no, wait, hold on, let me explain this. But you really don't have time to say anything. They have it down to a science when they take you. I mean, it's just, you're going whether you want to or not. And from that point on, nothing was in my control anymore. I mean,
yeah, it's
nothing
pretty surreal.
that I did. It is. And but I had just gotten this brand new outfit that I loved, and I was wearing it that day. And this becomes important because that sticks with you everywhere that you go. It follows you around like a little buddy, because when you go to you wait at jail for a length of time, like Tom was saying, before they come and get you and take you where you're going to go. They don't tell you which camp you're going to go to. Usually they send you hours away from where you live so that they don't have to worry about you trying to escape and going back home. They want to keep you as far away from where you're from as possible. And so in the middle of the night, they just come and get you like a fraternity would when you're hazing, when you're pledging and hazing, and they put you in a bus and you're gone. And you have to change out from your onesie, your bright orange onesie, like this guy has on the screen. And I got to put my outfit on again, and that was I was like, okay, I feel normal for just a little bit. And then I got to the camp, and where you're in the room where you have to strip down in front of like 80 other people going around you, they put your stuff in a box and say, okay, you need to, this is a list of what you can take to your cell. This is the stuff that you can't. Everything that you can't will be incinerated, or you can donate it to the Goodwill. And I was like,
why can't you get it back when you leave?
Don't know. Just wasn't an option. Wasn't an option.
Because it costs money to store it.
Right. Yeah. That's the only thing I can think
space.
of. It takes up space.
Oh,
so
well, that's just another thing they can fucking charge you for. What difference does it make?
They do. If I chose to get it incinerated, you have to pay the $13 it costs to ship it to the incinerators. Your only free option. I would be like, here, give me a
match. I can burn this shit in the trash can for fucking free.
When I say you pay for everything, that's not an exaggeration. You pay for pencils, paper, envelopes, stamps. Everything that you do costs there. Everything that you do. But I will say, with the phone call thing at least at the camp that I was at, and this is going to show you just the kind of people that I'm talking about. When I was there my first night, I had somebody come up to me. It's actually the first person I had a conversation with come up to me and say, hey, I know you probably want to go call your people. Come on, let's go do that. And that was just like a tradition. The newest person there would get a phone call from somebody that was the newest person before, and you would pass that on down to new people that were coming in so that they could actually have
that was nice.
A communication. Yeah, I mean, they're good people. Like I said, yeah, there are people that are. I've ran into a lot of assholes there, sure. And another thing to speak about is the guards. I think too, because there are good guards there. There are really good guards there, but for the most part, you get the ones that want to be your stereotypical guard. You know, the ones that like to push their impose their will. Usually it's a bunch of people that got picked on in high school, and now this is their chance to come back and make a man of themselves.
I don't understand the point in that either. Like, I don't understand the point in that either. You're stuck there. They're not. Why do you have to pick on people? That, like, I don't understand why you have to bully people. Like, I get that you have to be. I get because of some of the kinds of people that they have to deal with. They have to maintain an authoritative air, whatever. But like, they're people. I guess so follow-up question on the paper thing that you were talking about, like papers, envelopes, all that shit. Can people send like stationery and envelopes and things to the prisoners, and they can keep like it stacked in their room or whatever? Like can you gift it to them?
Nope.
No.
Because people,
what do you mean?
people
Like,
are hiding
send you envelopes?
Yeah, people are hiding.
Like if somebody on the outside, like if you had, like if Kyle's mom had wanted to send him, instead of him buying paper and shit and envelopes and stamps at the commissary, if Kyle's mom had wanted to send him stationery, envelopes, and stamps, like in a care package.
No, she could pay. She could put money in his like books to buy it in commissary, but no, they can't like send you outside stuff. You have to pay and buy their stuff.
People were hiding Suboxone strips, you know, that they give for people who are, I think, detoxing off of, but they're the strips that you put on your tongue and they act like, it kind of acts like heroin. People would envelopes where they kind of crease and glue over and hide those strips in between there or in the, you know, the spine of books. So they had to stop doing that because there was too much stuff coming in. Which is a whole other that's a whole other discussion. There is how stuff gets into
creativity,
prisons, and the underground, like tobacco and in some cases marijuana, because more fights and more people have been injured on prison grounds over tobacco, and seriously, that is the currency and the symbol of who is top dog or who runs the block, is who controls the tobacco coming in. It's just so in Texas, like a go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say in Texas, they actually don't allow tobacco.
They didn't here either.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought North Carolina was one of the states that you could. No.
No, I'm talking about the underground. Because
right, the ones that can bring it in. Yeah,
it's the B16 is in North Carolina. You get caught with tobacco, then they beat you, and the captain, depending on what mood he's in, can arbitrarily add day. You get game days as you work. That's another form of payment that they give you. You get like so much off a day for each day that you work, and so your sentence starts coming down once you're past your minimum. So when you start getting violations, it could be for anything. You could look at a guard the wrong way and he could write you up. That meter starts going back the way. And you can actually stay longer than you were even supposed to based on piss off. And the tobacco thing was the big thing that would keep people from leaving when they were supposed to. They would get caught with them. I got caught, probably got caught 8 times. I only got wrote up once though, because I could talk my way out of it. But yeah, it's a whole other microcosm. Anyway, I know we're probably getting long on time, y'all. I don't mean to keep you, but this is good to talk about. It's been cathartic for me to kick some of these stories out. And
one thing I did want to ask you before we leave, though, sure. did you have to join a gang or anything while you were in there?
Nah, Rainbow Gophers. That was my gang.
Damn, that's tough.
It is always about rainbows.
I'll tell you why. I got lucked. I lucked up. I was walking through one of the breezeway halls. I think I was carrying something back to the close house or anything, but Officer Toms was walking up and happened to bump it. He dropped all of his papers, what it boiled down to, and I picked up his stuff up for him and, you know, told him I was sorry for bumping into him or whatever. And we just got to talking, and he was the guy that was in charge of the canteens, and he needed a guy that could take over one of the commissary stores. So I was the canteen guy for a year there.
Oh, nice.
And when you're that guy, I mean, like, yeah, I lucked up because all of the food and stuff comes through me. And so when you're not working, you're dealing with people who are like, hey, let me get this, because you only got a certain amount of stuff that would come in, and, you know, people would come up to you with lists like, hold these back for me, do this for me, do this for me. So I knew who to make sure his list got up on top to not, you know, have any issues while I was there. So I played the game. You have to play the game, and that's what it is, one big game. But they make light of it. But with the things that Courtney deals with, and those kind of situations, when you're talking about people who are, we tell these stories in a kind of fond light, because looking back, they were, for what it had to be, it was not bad. I mean, still, sure, you're away from your family and all that, but for what it had to be, it wasn't all that bad. But it's a different story for people with these situations that like Courtney writes. And I think if anybody out there, if you have the time, you would do so much for somebody by just writing a letter once a week, because those guys are in. Oh, sure.
Oh, I was just going to say, I posted the link to that website that Courtney mentioned on my Twitter at @G_Caitlin. So it's on there.
Perfect. And I'll copy it in the descriptions as well. Those guys are in isolation, and that's an entirely different animal. I've seen several people that go into isolation from my year there, and I'm not exaggerating. If you're in there for like 1 or 2 weeks, none of them come out really the same that they went in. And it's because it does something, I think, psychologically to their person. Like when you're in a room stuck by yourself with no stimulation or interact is kept at a minimum, something like a letter and getting a communication from the outside world is the difference between you just completely giving up and knowing that there's somebody out there that is at least thinking about you. And I'm telling you, you can change lives in a way that you would not believe by simply writing a letter. And I'm sure Courtney can attest that they'll be interesting. I mean, it's not like you're going to get a boring letter from prison, because a lot of them probably tell you way more than you probably want to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna let Courtney you wrap us up with thoughts on that, and how people can kind of get involved, and how maybe they should start out their first letter if they're wanting to do that.
Yeah, I mean, just be yourself, just be normal and down to earth, and don't get scared. I think like one of the most important things that you've said here is that these are normal people that are in prison. They're not bad. Like, there are people in prison that are really scary people and should be locked up. But for the most part, the people in prison are just people who messed up, who found themselves in a situation of complete desperation and messed up. And they keep going back, not because they are bad or evil or anything like that, but because they get caught in this system that it's really hard to get out of unless you have like a wealthy, supportive family that can help you out. So yeah, don't be intimidated by them, because they're just normal people who messed up. And there was one guy that I was talking to in Oregon who just got released in May, and he was doing time for murdering his father. And he wrote me just pages upon pages of this horrific abuse that he claims to had suffered at the hands of his father. And one day it got to be too much, and he defended himself, and he went to prison for that. And that's his side of the story. I haven't seen all of the evidence, so, I'm not going to sit here and say that he just did it in self-defense, but there is a good chance. There's a good chance, because there's a lot of innocent people in prison. And the Innocence Project estimates around 120,000 at any given time are serving time for crimes they did not commit. And at any given time, the Innocence Project itself is investigating 6,000 to 8,000 cases, and they only take on cases with DNA evidence. So that tells you a lot right there. That tells you how many people out there who are probably innocent in prison. So, there's a lot of people out there who are just completely heartbroken, missing their family, can't afford to contact their family, their family can't afford to contact them. And if you send them a letter, just, be a normal person and just be nice, ask them questions, and you'll get some interesting stories for sure.
I can imagine. And I am going to bring back the guy from the law enforcement side. We're going to reschedule that at some point. I would love for you both to come back and be in on that, to get kind of that aspect of those, because obviously that will introduce a different dynamic from the side of somebody who's having to, put these people there. So I think that's important, though, too, to get that kind of that dialogue going. But Tom, do you want to kind of wrap up any last thoughts that you have? And once again, thank you for coming on. And actually, too, let us know how you're doing now. Like, when you got out, how was it for you? Did you?
Yeah. So, I mean, like y'all mentioned, having a support system is really important. And my family is really great, and they've been, 100% supportive and helpful throughout the whole thing with whatever they can. So that is a huge deal. I mean, I just feel so sorry for the people that don't have that support system in there. That's the worst thing. So for me, it's been really helpful. I've been able to, just stay on probation and not have to go back, which is, that's really impressive for the 10 years that I have. It's been tough, but it's, it's working out. And when it's finally over, I don't even know what I'll do, honestly. But I think like my one last thought for everybody would just be, if you do own a company or like an apartment complex or something like that, I know it has to do with insurance. So maybe it's not totally up to you, but don't just, if it says felony, don't just say like, no, never mind. Like, each person's different, and like I have a felony and have a great credit score and I'm a good worker, things like that. There are people like me out there that just because we have been to prison doesn't mean we're unhireable or not fit to live somewhere. So that would be my biggest thing.
And just to put that in perspective, one of those people too that has also been to prison is somebody that you tune in most nights for to find out the shape of the planet. So we can't all be that bad. But I want to thank both of you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry. There's actually a new sort of trend that's kind of popping up, and that's organizations or companies that are specifically hiring ex-cons. And like an example of this is Edwin's restaurant in Cleveland, Ohio. He only hires people who are recently out of prison, trained and fine, like cooking and all that stuff. And he has a 0% recidivism rate for everyone who's been through his restaurant. And he's just opened up another one for addiction recovery. So there's a whole bunch of different groups out there that will like specifically hire ex-cons. So if you're an ex-con out there who need, look for them.
Yeah. There's shitty people that are cons, there's shitty people that aren't. So just try not to hire shitty people regardless of their criminal background.
Yeah.
Often I find that most things in life can be summed up with by using a phrase like that. Like don't be an asshole. Don't hire shitty people.
Very simple.
Mm-hmm. they'll appreciate it. They'll appreciate it, and I think you'll be happy that you did. Like I said, a lot of these people just need a chance, and that chance could be the difference between them spending a life behind bars and being forgotten, or showing up on your YouTube screen. So that choice is yours. But thank you. Big thanks to both of you. This was I knew it was going to be good. This was even better than I thought it would be. It was really good to kind of, you can't really share it. You can't sit around and tell prison war stories with, anybody. Like I can't be, grandma, let's talk about,
yes, but, I know exactly what you mean.
Good. It was good to share with you guys, and Casey, as always, I'm so happy that we're doing this show in 2 weeks. Soul phone. We're going to take next Wednesday off because of the 4th of July. Casey said that she's got something about rocket bras that shoot fireworks and spin that she's going to surprise Godless Engineer with.
I did not say that. I just said I want to go see fireworks. That's it.
Okay. No one believes you.
Although we will watch fireworks over the Saturn V rocket because, Huntsville, Alabama, that's how we do.
Yeah, if rockets really existed and they went into space.
They do. When you come visit, when you come visit, we're going to go to the Space and Rocket Center.
Hey, Huntsville, Alabama, I've been to that center. It's pretty nice.
Yeah.
We're going to Dinosaur Adventureland. We're going to do
we can go to
surprise.
both because I live literally 5 minutes from the Space and Rocket Center, so it's fine.
Oh yeah, totally. I jinxed myself though because we probably shouldn't have said on air that we're going there because now Kent is going to be expecting us, and I have a feeling that he is already laying out Hawaiian shirts for all of us.
Yeah, we should wear Hawaiian shirts.
We should thwart him. Yeah. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. For all of us here, we appreciate you guys joining us and watching along, and we'll see you tomorrow for King Crocoduck, and Furious George Lujack makes his return tomorrow at 8. Yep. That's an excellent sign-off phrase.